Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I'm Andy Kirikides, joined by my co-host Keith Glasser. How we doing?
Great. How are you?
We got our favorite guest on again. Sorry to the rest of you fellas who've been on the podcast, but we got Coach Grasse back with us. We're going to talk some college baseball today. Pretty fired up. We got some good topics to cover. Thanks for joining us again, Coach.
Nah, I mean, the only person more fired up than you guys is me. I mean, I love it. You know, I always know when, Monday comes around, we get in that group chat, we start hashing it out, and I'm like, all right, we're ready to go. Here we go. So no, but I appreciate you guys having me on as always. Thank you. Hopefully
enough of the pleasantries.
We have some fun. We're gonna have some fun. I'll do this. We're gonna have some fun. We're live right now. We got three games going on with top 5 teams in the country, right? No, wait, 7. So top 7 teams in the country. We're recording right now, so we're going to be a little bit behind you guys, or a little in front of you guys in terms of when you're seeing this. But we got 3 of the best games going on in the country on a Thursday night. There's nothing better. Let's do it.
Let's get into it. Where do you want to start? I know the. Let me. You know what? I'm gonna choose it for us because we've been talking about this quite a bit the last couple of weeks. Let's talk about the free base epidemic in college baseball right now. And I know we all have some slightly different theories, but let's try to unpack this a little bit, because when it happens for a first couple weeks, it's like, guys are getting loose, yada yada. But we're 5 weeks in, and I don't think I've ever seen more box scores with teams walking 15 or 16 guys. In fact, I went back and looked at previous seasons of teams that I've either coached or played for, and you're talking having double-digit walks once or twice in a whole season. And I'm watching teams 19 walks in a game. Like, it's freaking crazy. So let's open up that. Let's open up that fun sack.
Yeah, that's a good way to start this thing, isn't it? It's the pitch. I would even go even macro, right? Like, the pitching numbers are wild. The walks, the runs, and the strike. The one thing that's super interesting, I'm not going to take credit for this, because one of our really good friends, coach to play at San Francisco, gave me this one too, and we were talking about this topic for some time, and he's like, the strikeout numbers are wild, but if you look at like plate appearances, because of the walks and the hits batsmen, it's about what it normally is. It's just there's so many more guys going to the plate, so the strikeout numbers at the Division I baseball level are high. Plus the plus the hits batsman, so you're talking about non-plate appearances, and all these guys are going to the plate, and there's just more opportunities to strike guys out. So, like, you look at these numbers, like, it's crazy. Like, if you look at the K to walk ratio in the country, it's insane, absolutely insane. And I don't know. I don't really know like what the actual answer is, obviously. And we all coach at a high level for a really, really, really long time. And I was a pitching coach for a long time too. Like, it's crazy, these pitching numbers. But what I will say is what's even crazier is just what Arkansas is doing with those pitching numbers too. But I'll let Keith finish that.
Yeah, I mean. There was a point in time where a lot of people were calling for somebody's head and saying he was a snake oil salesman. And I think the tweet, like, earlier in the week, the last like 5 weekends, it's their numbers are absurd. They're starting 3. I mean, they opened up SEC play and they gave up 1 run. 1 run in SEC play.
25 consecutive scoreless innings against Missouri. Didn't score until the 7th inning of Game 3. Didn't score a single run.
They're it's unreal what they're doing when you're watching some of these other programs. And like, look, I'm not like, we're not taking away anything from a lot of these top programs, and this is the reality of what's going on in college baseball. But like, you saw, I mean, Wake. I mean, last weekend they scored like 38 runs and lost the series, which, one, that's hard to do. But two, like they have a really good pitching staff. I know right now it's a little up in the air, but like, you see some of the better pitching staffs that are kind of falling victim to some of these things that are going on in college baseball, and Arkansas is not like. I mean, if they can keep this going, watch out, like, because that like good pitching in college baseball is going to beat good hitting, because there's not enough guys top to bottom, 1 through 9, that are going to be able to beat you. You're going to win a lot of games.
I think that's a huge point too. Like you're dead on. Like some of this stuff will play out where, like, hey, we're gonna have slug some teams, but like when we get to June, like, I mean, we've done this enough, guys. Like we've seen this, we've talked about this enough. Like if you run into a buzzsaw of what Coach Hobbs has done at Arkansas, whether he's a snake oil salesman or whatever you want to call it on Twitter. And I love the SEC. You guys know this. Everyone knows this as listened to this podcast before. You guys know this. I am a huge, huge SEC baseball fan. Huge. I think it's the best league in the country. I don't even think it's close. Do I have my opportunities to poke fun at it and to, make some jokes? Of course. Just because I will. But it's the best baseball league. It's done the most for our sport. It's not even close what it's done for our sport. They constantly are sending, multiple teams to Omaha, 4 or 5 teams to Omaha every year. But I laugh when, fans of the Razorbacks are tweeting that they're not going to go to Omaha because of Coach Hobbs, and Arkansas 5 weeks in. And I'll reiterate this just so everyone's clear, has a 5-to-1 walk to K ratio, or a K to walk ratio. 5-to-1. That's absurd. Like if you're really good on the mound, like 3.5, maybe a 4. Arkansas is 5-to-1.
Yeah, anybody who's listening to this who possibly tweeted that after Hagen Smith first started the year that Matt Hobbs was the problem, you're an idiot. Like, he's year in and year out, that guy has been as good of a pitching coach as anybody in the country. He's been doing it since he was at freaking junior college in California. But what they're doing right now,
he did it awake, Andy, right? Like he did it awake. Like, and I know that. I mean, up until, if you look at, right, like up until last year, and Corey did a great job. Coach Muscara did a phenomenal job last year with that team. They went, they were right there. They were, in the semifinal. Nobody in like the history of Wake Forest has had like a realistic ERA, and Hobbs did it for year after year after year at Wake. Like Wake's a bandbox. It's small. The ball flies. Like, and that dude had the lowest ERAs ever there.
That's why he's at Arkansas. Like,
yeah,
for the last 15 years, they haven't won a national championship. That's the only knock on their resume. But for the last decade at least, Arkansas has probably been the best program in college baseball consistently over the last 10 years. The one thing they haven't gotten, and they've come super close multiple times, is they don't have the national championship, but they haven't had a down year, right? Like they just really haven't had any of those where,
No, I mean you're not wrong. You're dead on. I mean
they're as good as anybody has ever been.
They are as consistent. I mean, I think you could probably have an argument with Vanderbilt, right? Like, I mean, we could also hear, right? Like, you could say consistently, and maybe even solely with Florida. Like, you could say Florida, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt have been as consistent in Omaha, in a super, in the top 10. That's really anybody. I mean, maybe Oregon State, maybe. I mean, they had a little bit of a drop off, but like if you're looking at like consistency, like I mean, goodness gracious, like Dave Van Horn. I mean, like they're going to be those three are going to be a handful again. Well, two of those three are going to be a handful again, but
yeah, I mean, but there's no like you can't look at one opening weekend like anything else. Like everyone says it in football, like it's a false. You know what's that in every year when the first opening week in football is like it's a lie. Like no one's as good as you think they are, no one's as bad as you think they are. You know, but to think that coming out of the first week, I mean, the next weekend, I think Hagen Smith went, what, 7? And punched out like 15 on like 70 pitches? Like, that math doesn't even like add up in your, like when you start thinking about that stuff. Like if they stay healthy on the mound, like, I mean, they're almost a full point better in K to walk ratio to Texas A&M, who a lot of people think is the best pitching staff in the country. And they're almost a full point better. And I'll even to take it to really exaggerate the point. Arkansas has 255 punch outs to A&M's 253, and A&M has done, or excuse me, Arkansas has done it in less innings. They got more punch outs in less innings. Like, my goodness, are they good? But I also think, like, I do think, in talking to a lot of people too, like, there's a little bit, like, there seems to be, the strike zone seems to be a little bit smaller this year than it has been in years past. You know, the baseball seems to be flying a little bit more than years past. So I think there's a little bit more to it. You know, I think the one thing that stands out to me too, and, you know, I think Andy and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, like, the amount of hit by pitches is substantially up. And I haven't watched every game, right? But like, I feel like there's been a movement, and I haven't coached in 2 years, but like, I loved the rule change when it came in 22, where like you didn't have to move your feet, right? Like you could stand there, but if you were hanging out over, like they might make it a ball and put you back in the box. But I feel like we've kind of moved away from that a little bit, because I always had an issue in coaching, especially when you get a guy like, you get a left-hander who just yanks a fastball or a breaking ball and hits a right-handed hitter. Like, that dude should not be rewarded with a ball and let my guy stay like he hits in the box. Like, you missed your spot by a substantial amount. That runner should go to first. And I feel like we've kind of moved to that point in the game where, like, guys are getting clipped and you're just getting the base. And, you know, but I think you also have to pitch in order to have success right now with what's going on. So, you know, I think you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Because if you let some of these guys get extended who have a little bit of thump, it's going to get hit hard.
Yeah, I just did a quick stat check on Dave Van Horn. He's been at Arkansas for 21 years. He's averaging 40 wins a year. They haven't had less than 44 wins in a season since 2015. Pretty darn good. Back to the strike throwing thing. I had a coach tell me this the other day, and I thought this is a really interesting way to talk about it, because we see the velocities, we see the athletes. College baseball is more talented than it's ever been, but he also said that he thinks the gap between doing things that win baseball games versus the talent might be the biggest that it's ever been. And I think that's something to think about, because we are entering an age where the vast majority of kids in the last couple of years that are playing college baseball have grown up solely in the travel ball era, where a lot of the details of the game are overlooked because you're trying to hit numbers, you're trying to get noticed. And this isn't throwing shade or throwing blame on everybody. I'm just pointing out what seems to be fairly obvious to me, that you have a lot of kids, and I experienced this, and I know you guys did too, that'll step on a college campus and they're plenty talented enough, but there's a big lack of understanding for the minutia that is really impactful at the college level. And something as simple as the free bases is a massive piece of the puzzle. We were talking to Case about this, and it's something that we used to track at William and Mary. But I think he's going on almost 15 years of data now, where if we won the free base battle, so basically if you gave up less walks, errors, and hit by pitches, and there's other ways to give free bases, going first to third, stolen bases, yada, yada. But if you just stick to those three for simplicity, and it's kind of what we're talking about, the win percentage of those teams is like, if you win the free base battle, it's like 81% by literally just not giving up as many free bases as the other team. And I don't think it's an oversimplification that if you throw a lot of strikes, you'll have a chance to win, because hitting's hard and you have defenders out there that don't suck. And I mean, if you look at the data, if you look at the history of it, like teams who don't walk people generally end up winning a bunch of games. And I watched it happen. Like, I think we would set it at our goal that I think Case used to set it at for the pitchers was, I think it was 5. If we could keep our walks and hit by pitches under 5 for a game, that was our goal that we would go in with. Maybe it was 6. But either way, it was a number that was attainable, but we needed to work towards, and it really hit on the importance of what we were trying to preach in terms of challenging guys. The amount of games we won when we were under that number, I think it was even higher. I think it was like 86% or something like that.
And now you're talking about, like, there's teams that are like 2x, almost 3x times that.
Yeah.
Two.
Yeah. When you talk about, you got.
Don't get 3x times that.
Yeah. Keith did some numbers the other day. We were flipping back and forth on it. What'd you find? It's like 23% of college baseball has a whip over 2 right now.
Yeah, it was like 22 or 23%, like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
That's not even by pitches.
It's not even hit by pitches.
No, it's not even that's what I'm saying. It's not even counting hit by pitches.
Right, so it's higher.
Crazy.
So like it's way higher than that. When you had the hits back, then you're probably looking at, if it was 22 or 23%, I guarantee it was probably close to 40%.
Easily.
I mean,
yeah, you're talking
last week,
120 teams in college
this is going to sound insane, and we can move on after this because I don't want to beat on a dead horse here, but a good K to walk number, right? Like, I mean, I was a divisional pitch coach for a long time, so I was divisional pitch coach for 7 years. Like, a good K to walk number is 2 to 1. It's a good number, right? Like, punch out 2. Obviously, you're going to have to hit batsmen, so it's going to be a little bit lower than that. But, like, if you're 2 to 1, you're pretty good. There was 100 teams in all of college baseball out of 300 that were 2 to 1 or better.
Yeah, so
2/3 or worse.
Yes.
66% of college
We
baseball
have teams,
has a major
teams
problem.
that are like 0.5, 0.6 K to walk numbers. That's crazy. And then you add the hits batsman, you're talking about you're averaging well over maybe 1.5 to 1 on free bases to punch outs. That's it. That's crazy.
Yeah. I think some of it has to be. And I think it's even worse at the mid to lower level of college baseball, because you're seeing it at the highest level. Like we were talking about Wake and Virginia last week, Sunday game 15-10, and there was a combined 19 walks in the game. Like that is not normal for those groups, but they're doing it. But I think for the lower mid-level teams, right, to the back end of college baseball, so you're talking like teams 180 to 300, right? And I'm going to throw this out there. I think those guys who are recruiting at that level at times are more concerned with getting kids who hit a certain number, because nobody bats an eye if you bring in a kid who throws 90. And they've lost sight of the fact that you can develop kids and velocity can be added instead of going getting the kid who throws a bunch of strikes and putting a premium on it. And I'm not calling out any programs on this, but like we've been flipping through this, dude. I mean, there's teams who went 15 straight games without giving up less than 10 runs. So what's going on there? And I do think that there's a huge emphasis on velocity in the recruiting process, right? And I don't think it's wrong. Throwing hard gives you the opportunity to make errors, but the strike zone in college is smaller, and dudes don't give a shit if you throw 90. It's not hard. If you don't throw 95, you do not throw hard anymore. It's just that simple. Like you can't beat guys with velocity at 90 miles an hour.
Like even 95, like I have a guy that pushed me in high school, and his stuff is as electric comes. And there was a video posted a month ago, and he was 93 to 95. And there are hitters in there that are taking hacks at 95, and I'm going, these are high school kids. Like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, these guys would have been, they've been waving tennis rackets at this thing. And his stuff is legit. Like, don't get me wrong, his stuff's really, really legit. Like, he's probably a draft guy. Like, but I'm looking at it and I'm going, these are high school, like, and they're high-end high school guys, but these are high-end high school guys. You're not blinking an eye at 95, and you're like, well, if he does this at the next level, right? Like, when 1 through 9 is that as good as that, high school hitter, holy moly, like, these guys are ready to hit 95. These guys are ready to hit 96. Like, at that level, they're ready to go, but there's so many kids that are just trying to catch a velo number that are not actually pitching, and that's why you're seeing these numbers that are, I mean, when you look on Tuesday, you look at these Tuesday scores. I mean, these Tuesday scores they're football scores. 21-17, and you get the minority, like, 3-0, whatever. But I mean, you're getting 17-9, whatever, 18-10, like every Tuesday, every Wednesday, and it's like, well, something's obviously different. The game hasn't really changed that much, but whether it's coaching, whether it's the way the guys are just training him, just trying to train velocity. But the thing is that, yes, you're trying to train velocity, which is great, and that's awesome. But all fall, they have faced guys at that same velocity that are doing the exact same thing as you. So that's why the walk numbers are up, because they're able to recognize that it's not a strike. The runs are up. The batting average against is up because, it's 3-1, and of course I'm dead right on a fastball. Well, for a Division I hitter at even at any level, 95 it's run of the mill now. Like, these kids are seeing it in high school, they're seeing it in travel ball. Like, so they're getting 95 on a 3-1 count, and of course just smacking into the gap. And again, that's why we're seeing these numbers, because it's just, hey, let's just train velocity. Hey, let's just do, we're just going to try to throw as hard as we possibly can, which is great. Everyone wants velocity, but there also has to be a coaching part of it. And I think that's the biggest issue we're seeing right now is that there's really that's not going on. And it might be because of the transfer portal too. Just throw that in there too.
Yeah. Interesting time to be alive in the world of pitching, because it's cool to throw 93, but if you can't edge that thing in a 1-0 count and get it off somebody's barrel consistently, like, it just doesn't matter anymore. Like, the kid, I think and it'll be interesting to see if it changes at all, because I think the kid who's 87 to 89, who can command the ball, maybe sink it a little bit, who can cross count guys because he's got a little bit of feel. Like, I would argue that kid has a chance to be more successful than the kid who's 91 to 93 trying to throw as fucking hard as he can all the time. Like, if he's got the pitchability to go with it, I think velocity actually matters a little bit less. Like, you still can't throw, you ain't getting people out in the ACC throwing 84, but you're also not getting guys out in the ACC throwing 93 if you can't, like, legitimately pitch. Like,
but I think that we cross that bridge, right? Like what you just said, right? Like, the guy who can pitch, excuse me, the guy who can pitch at a lower velocity kind of got phased out. because it was just like velo, velo, velo. But now the kid that's just velo that can't pitch is now also getting phased out because they see that 4 times a week in the fall. And now 84 when we were growing up, and we're not that old, I know that, but we'll just, sound like old, heads here and be like, back in the day, when it was 90 was hard. But now we're at the point where, the 93 down the middle doesn't even matter because these kids are not even flinching on that because they see it in travel ball, in high school, all fall. Like it's easy. So now you're seeing these numbers and it's kind of switching back to the hitter, right? Whereas like the hitter's kind of going back to the advantage where the pitchers have been in the advantage probably in the last like 6 years. Now it's almost going back to the hitter, and we're seeing these crazy numbers. I mean, like I said, the runs on the midweek are crazy to me.
The midweek runs are absurd, and I think the other thing, I don't necessarily I feel as though over the last handful of years, because velo has become a prevalent thing that everyone we've kind of unlocked how to throw harder, right? Like it's become a lot easier than I think it was, even when we were growing up. But I also think I think
it's 2020 that helped a huge amount. Because I think we built pitchers in a basement, in a garage, in a lab.
Right.
I totally agree.
And I think that I wonder sometimes with the guys, what you have to have as outside of the ability to pitch and locate, you have to have something else that goes with velo. Because even if you're breaking ball or your changeup or whatever you have, if you're not gonna get swings and misses or you're not gonna get weak contact and you can't locate that for strikes, hitters are, to your point, they see velo all the time now. If you can't throw anything other than a fastball for a strike at a high clip, guys are just gonna spit on breaking balls and just sit dead red fastball. And hey man, I see this all the time. When we were all growing up, 87, 88 was kind of like the ping zone. This guy's 87, 88. He's a stock right-hander. Now that velo's jumped up a little bit. It's no real difference. I just think, everyone falls in love with the velo. But to your point, everyone's seeing this all the time. And the other part of it from a training standpoint, you can throw a hack attack up and just let it rip. And you can get any version of the 3-wheeled machine. And you're getting legit live 93, 95, and I can just sit and I can get my timing down and I can get super comfortable facing 89, 95. That didn't exist and we're not old, but that didn't exist when we were playing. You had the old 2-wheel jugs machines with the yellow ball that, you had no idea where it was going through, or it just threw it in the same exact spot every time. And, you couldn't necessarily jump it up. And, now with the training and from a hitting standpoint, you can get a little bit further along and you can handle the velo because you're going to see it. I used to just set our machine up at, I'd set it at 90 and be like, all right, we're going to see it. So let's figure it out. Can't hit it. We're going to figure out how to get our barrels to it. And the more you see it, the more comfortable you get. And all of a sudden, velo is not scary anymore. Now it's okay, we got to train some breaking balls. And, the further you get into a weekend series and especially in a midweek, and the deeper you get into bullpen in those games, there's a reason that those guys are, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 on the depth chart. They don't have the secondary stuff or they don't have the velo or they can't locate. Now the hitters, the hitters are just as good. It's the same hitters that generally are hitting on the weekend. Now they're facing, inferior pitching. It stands to reason that we're going to see these numbers. And I think that, that was always the argument with some guys of I think when, younger guys of this guy throws too slow, he can't hit, it's hard to hit. You have to throw substantially slower nowadays to throw under the hitting speed. Because it's for most part, guys are going to be able to bump the velo and you're right in that ping zone and guys are going to be able to barrel. They're not scared of it anymore. So you have to be, and then if you can't command the secondary stuff, that's going to lead to more walks because all of a sudden, you're you can't command stuff, you're behind, and you're either going to get whacked or we're going to try to edge and you're too far outside. And we don't want to, like, it's 3-hole guy, 2-0 count, 3-1 count. Like, I don't want to leave this out over the plate. Like, this ball, like, they could lose this ball very easily. You know, and I think someone else, you know, I was talking to somebody, a good friend of all of ours a couple of weeks ago, like, he was like, I think with Synergy too, man, like, pitchers have tells, and I think people are picking up on it pretty easily. Like, you know, they were playing somebody who's like, they were sitting, like, they had every breaking ball he threw. He's like, I have to go back and figure out what his tell is because they clearly had it. Every breaking ball we threw for 3 innings, like, they just sat on. And, you know, but I think with the data and the analytics and then also the video that's available, like, there's a lot more information for hitters, which is starting to close that gap down on a lot of these pitchers.
I think that's a really good point. Really, really good point is that the hitters are way more educated, especially for coaches who are giving them that information and being able to sit down with a guy and say, hey, man, like, this dude, he's going to throw 40% breaking balls, but he's only going to throw 18% of them for strikes. So until he proves that he can do it consistently, like, we can narrow down our pitches, or this guy likes to pitch this way to certain guys. Like, that information, I think, is the biggest separator when you get as a hitter in college. It's not your mechanics. It's your mind and being able to understand what a guy's going to do, how he's trying to attack you, what the situation calls for. That's the separator. And there's so much data now where we used to have to do it on the fly a little bit. And this wasn't that long ago, but you get your scout report.
Even 10 years ago, because we all coached 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Like, in 2014, right? I was coaching. You guys were, I mean, you're looking at, like, perfect game. Like, hey, let's see if we can find some video. Like, now they're getting every pitch. There's the chart. Like, everything is right there for these guys. So, like, yeah, like, offense is back up again. But just like any time I think in our game, and I say this because I love, especially college baseball, but I love baseball in general. Like, the pitchers were ahead for a while. Now the hitters seem like they're coming back. 5 years, 10 years, who knows? Like, you know, we can be talking on this podcast in 10 years and be like, oh my gosh, the pitchers, you know, everyone's got a K to walk 5 like Arkansas. Like,
people don't throw enough balls anymore.
You know what I mean? But, like, you know, like, we're laughing about it, but who knows? Like, you know, and 10 years ago, if we would have said that, you know, the pitchers are going to be so far ahead of the hitters that you'd be like, no way. Like, it was fairly even at that point. Like, it's just part of the game, and I think it's healthy. Like, and it's good. Like, the pitchers are ahead. Well, hold on 1 second. Here come the hitters. You know, and that's where we're at now.
I think there's another piece of this too, and I think some teams have kind of jumped on this, you know, anecdotally at the start, but I think some people do it a little bit more. The more, and I noticed it, and it's not to say that I actively tried to do this, but I was talking with PD last year. They were talking like they try to throw a handful more balls during BP than they used to. And, you know, I think one thing with the hitters, especially, like, you know, how many, like, in college specifically, like, you get 40 minutes in BP. So, like, you try to roll through, like, there's only, like, you're probably going to get 3, maybe 4 rounds, but, like, you're trying to throw as many strikes as possible to get all your swings in. You know, and I think that, like, you fall into that, you know, and you do it in practice, man. Like, it's 2-hour time sucks sometimes when it's just straight hitting. And you're trying to throw as many strikes as possible, but, like, that, you're not actually replicating anything that these guys are going to see in game. Like, they're not going to go up in their 3 at-bats and see 15 to 20 straight strikes. Like, there's variation in what's going on. And I think sometime for a little while there, like, a lot of people were, like, hitters were just kind of trained to just go up and swing because, hey, all I do when I train is just see strikes and swing. So I'm just going to swing. And, you know, I think you have a lot more guys now with the rise of machines and, you know, being able to video a lot of this stuff. Like, hey, like, we need to mix in a little bit of variation in BP where it's not just straight strikes all the time. Like, we're not replicating anything from an actual gameplay standpoint, which I think kind of does advance the hitters a little bit. That closes that gap down a little bit. Like, I noticed it a little bit with our guys. Like, I'm not saying like I didn't invent this. I just noticed it because I was the only one throwing BP, and some days I sucked. Like, there were days where I couldn't throw a lot of strikes, and then like all of a sudden we were a lot better offensively. I was like, I wonder. And but like it gets them thinking, and it gets them comfortable taking pitches and not necessarily, just in full on swing mode every time. It relaxes them. Like, all right, yeah, like that was ball, or like that was borderline, but like, hey man, like 0-2, 1-2, like we're probably going to have to get rid of that pitch, but a good take in BP. And working through those things and advancing your approach there. But I think the approach side of the hitting has become far more advanced than what it was when we played, or even when we coached 10 years ago. Like, there's way more that goes into this. But like, to your point, like we did have to do this on the fly when we all played. Like, there was no synergy, there was no track, none of that stuff existed. Like, you got to print out from your trusting
myself,
but you're trusting other coaches. And we all did this. You all exchanged scouting reports, but you're trusting your friends or people you don't know that like they actually wrote down correct information and hoping that it's going to get you through the weekend, which is wild if you think about it now.
yeah, you're absolutely right. We used to do it by hand. Like, I used to track every pitch in the dugout and stand there in the on deck circle with guys and walk them through what the guy's pitch mix is, how many strikes he's landed, how he's pitching guys that are left-handed, how he's pitching guys in runners in scoring position. And like, sometimes you don't get to paint a picture until like the third or fourth, right? Because you can't make any assumptions off of one at bat. But the goal would be to have information at the back end of the game that guys could go off of. Or maybe you could pick up something about how a guy's, calling pitches, how the coach is calling pitches, and start to get a feel for that kind of stuff. But I think that's an interesting point. Live update off the scoreboard here. Arkansas is up 1-0 in the bottom of the sixth. Hagen Smith struggling tonight. 5 2/3, 12 punchies. 87 pitches. 12 punch outs. Six innings, 12 punch outs. Got an 8-7 ball game in Winston-Salem. Looks like Walt's going to ride out Mr. Hartle. See if he can get a couple more innings out of him. Let's see what we got. We got A&M, Mississippi State, who I called out a couple weeks ago as being not all that impressive. Seemed to have stepped up a little bit. Got a 1-1 ball game there in the third.
Andy, I will say too, because I'm a man and I will admit when I'm wrong. And I joked, and I know you were sick at this point, but I gave my, kind of my digs at the SEC. And like I said tonight, and I've said a million times, I'm the biggest SEC baseball fan probably in the world. But the SEC, I mean, holy moly. I mean, I called out Mississippi State and I called out Ole Miss on this show 4 weeks ago, maybe. I don't know if Mississippi State has lost since I called them out. And I'm not saying that Coach Lamone has heard this show at all. I'm not saying that. I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, the Magnolia State, like, are you serious? Like, now, what I will say is that I also gave a lot of praise to the Gators. And they may win every SEC series and may lose every Tuesday. And I know Kendall Rogers tweeted this from Deal Baseball, so I'll give props to Kendall on this one, because this is hilarious because he tweeted it this week. What do you do in the top 25? Like, if you lose every Tuesday but you win every SEC series, are they a top 25 team? Like, can we get on? Like, can we address that? Like, how do we go about that? I say no.
The fact that they have them,
I also don't know though.
Yeah, the fact that they have them ranked number 6 right now, I think is
But besides the point. We're all in agreement. We've hashed that out. They are not a top 25 team.
No, I think what separates top 25 teams from top 50 teams is your ability to win midweek. Like, I think that's because it's about depth. It's about consistency. right? Hey, nothing against the teams that they're playing, but like you're Florida, man. You can't be losing midway games to Jacksonville. Like it's just that it's really that simple. You get everybody gets a chance to. You're going to have bad games, and that's going to happen, right? Like no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like we were talking about it when me and you talked a couple weeks ago, Jonathan. Ole Miss was coming off of 4 straight losses and looked freaking terrible. And since then, they've gone 14-2. So like, good on them. Like things change real quick, but if you can't win midweek games that you're supposed to win, like Florida's number 4 starter should be a number 1 starter for every non-ACC. He's that kind of talent is really what I'm getting at. Like you should be able to run out a dude that can win you games on Tuesday or on Wednesday. And they haven't been able to do it. So until proven otherwise, like I don't think you can have them as a top 25 team. Could they make it to the College World Series? Yeah, because they can lean on their weekend guys. But at some point, they're probably going to get exposed if they have to overcome a regional where they lose a game, because now you got to go back to that guy. Like, certainly could be wrong. A month from now, they probably, Kevin O'Sullivan's one of the best coaches in college baseball, and I'm sure he's got a plan of how he's going to try to straighten that stuff out. And we're still third of the way through the season, so there's a lot of baseball left. But right now, if that doesn't get cleaned up, like it's not a top 25 team in my eyes.
I totally agree. I know me and you talked about this. Like, I don't believe they're a top 25 team either. It's funny to see, some teams, struggle a little bit and kind of see like how the rankings play out. And, even Vandy, like you look at Vandy, right? Vandy struggled early. Like, Arkansas really has never really struggled to an extent just because of their schedule. But, you laugh about, people calling for, their pitching coach's job. And next thing you know, they're the best in the country at 5 to 1K to walk. Like, stupid. Vanderbilt, a little bit of a slow start, lose game opening weekend. I think they lost a midweek like Dayton or somebody like they're right back in it. Oregon State's really, really, really good.
How about Florida State?
Yeah, dude.
Hasn't lost a game. And I think they should be, and I think D1 did a really good job this week of putting them in and putting them at the right spot. I know it was like the highest they've ever put a team in that wasn't ranked the last week, which I think is important because I think they're 19-0. I don't know what they did tonight. I don't know if they played tonight, but I think they're 19-0.
They are 19-0.
19-0 is legit. Like, that is absurd to be 19-0.
And they played 2 ACC weekends.
Yeah, 2 weeks into ACC play, too.
And this is a team, right? So, like, people don't remember this because this is like a small fact that gets overlooked. Up until last year, even when Mike Martin Jr. was there, to the Sun, they had won 40 straight games over 40 straight years. They did not win 40 games last year. Mm-hmm. Mike Martin got fired. They won over 40 games 2 years ago. And Aaron Length, which was phenomenal hire and whatever. They had won 40 straight games over 40 straight years. Didn't do it last year, and now they have 20. They're like halfway, 19, whatever. They're halfway home to that 40 number already, and it's not even Easter.
Nope. And Western Carolina, South Florida, Michigan State, Illinois, Western Michigan, Florida Gulf Coast. Like, here's the thing, like,
you know what they're doing?
They're beating teams that they should beat, but they swept New Orleans. They scored 35 runs and gave up 7, and they went 13-0, 15-7, 8-0. Like, beat Florida 12-8 on the road, swept Notre Dame, and then beat Stetson 1-0 this week. So we stand corrected. They've only played 1 ACC weekend. They had a bye the first week, it seems.
It's a double bye in the ACC.
But they have Clemson this weekend. So obviously we'll see how it shakes out this weekend. They're playing at Clemson.
I think one of the other things, to talk about out there, and I know Clemson's like top 3 in a lot of rankings, and I think they're number 1 in FPI, but like we'll learn a lot about Clemson this weekend. Coach Backus done a phenomenal job, but there's been a lot of guys that have done a great job this year. Obviously Link, down at Florida State, Coach Backus, like there's been a lot of really, really, really good jobs done, and and obviously this is the time of the year we're going to find out, like, the rubber's going to meet the road, right? We're going to find out exactly what they are. But it's an exciting time, I think, this year. Obviously Arkansas's pitching is really, really, really legit, but, just like every year, there's a lot of teams that can win this whole thing.
Oh, without a doubt.
Florida State's pitching numbers are ridiculous as well. I'm looking at him right now, and I don't know if you guys have seen that the Arnold kid throw. The lefty who throws from like it's like just above sidearm, and he's like 93 to 97. He's got a .33, 27 innings pitched, 44 punches. They got a 3-to-1 walk ratio, Jonathan. They've punched 248 guys so far in 19 games, and they've only walked 85. Just stuffing it on people right now. And yeah, the lighter kid is coming to his own. I saw him throw in high school, and he's really started to figure it out. But
I listen to the other thing too is that Link hired Micah Posey from Dallas Baptist, who's all he's done is had success at every level. His dad's a legend in Tallahassee. I think his dad's like coached at some high school. He's got like 1,000 wins. So it's not shocking that, they knew exactly what they were doing. He brought Rich Wallace with him from Notre Dame. I coached against Link. I actually sat in a press box one time for like 6 hours while Link's son was playing when I was at Furman. But it's not shocking that they're doing what they're doing. I think what's more surprising, though, right, is that from how bad they were a year ago, I think they were almost dead last in the ACC, and you guys can double check me on that. But I think they were dead last in the ACC, which is, again, unheard of when the Martin family had won 40 straight games, 45 straight years or whatever it was. That's more impressive than anything else, just because, boom, flip a switch, 1 year in, Link gets a job. Next thing you know, they're back. They're 20-0, and you're talking about probably a top 8 seed at this point, if we're talking that early. So, super impressive job down there in Tallahassee.
They were 9-21 in conference last year and 23-31 overall, which was the worst record in the ACC.
The heck of an old turnaround. Who else is kind of firing you up right now?
Coastal's my number one.
You love you some Coastal?
They're so legit offensively. The Bender kid is out of control. There's
518 Keith.
He's a 518 kid.
518 guy.
Sure is.
Legit. The issue I think the biggest issue with Coastal is going to be if they're a top 8 seed, I don't know if they're not going to get to Omaha, because in that building, with the way the wind blows, their pitching's good enough, I think. But I just don't know, like, if you're in that building and they're hitting last, and again, they're a top 8 seed, like, I don't know if you can outscore them. Like, yeah. I know NC State got them this week, late in the 9th on the road, but like, they were down. They don't give away at bats. They were down way late to JMU on Sunday in a rubber match. I think they scored 6 or 5 in the 9th against JMU in their first Sun Belt series. Like, I listened to Coach Gilmore speak this week. He was talking I was watching the NC State game, and he said, my 40 years or 30 years of being a head coach here is the most resilient group I've ever had. And I'm like, man, if you got a resilient group, and if that guy is calling this team the most resilient group, good luck to the Sun Belt, man, because Coastal's going to be a handful. They fire me up. I love Arkansas's pitching staff, and there's a couple others. I love Florida State, but Coastal, man, I think, good luck.
They are, they're going to be tough. They can flat out hit. It's rather impressive what they can do offensively. And if that's the most resilient, he won a national championship, and he's had a lot of really, really good teams at Coastal Carolina. And it's his last year. They could do a lot of really cool things this year, which I think would be awesome to see.
And those guys, you guys remember this too with their Natty run. Those dudes love that guy more than anything. And say that that's the most resilient group he's had in 30, 40 years, whatever he's been there. Feels like half a decade. Good luck, because they can swing it. 1 through 9, they are legit.
I still get so let's recap a couple things that we talked about, Jonathan. The Wake pick is not looking great right now. Not going good in Winston-Salem right now. Got some injuries, haven't been pitching as well. I think that they'll likely kind of hit their stride and could end up being a handful at the end of the year. But I think we got a couple of them. I know there was a couple that we talked about that are looking pretty good. We had Oklahoma and Dallas Baptist being two teams that's hey, pay attention to these squads. Oklahoma's up to 17, playing well. Dallas Baptist just doesn't do anything bad. They play defense and they run the bases and they are really good offensively and they throw a ton of strikes. And they're up to 15. And then the one that I keep coming back to, and maybe this is the year they break through, because I think they got some star power up front with I think you got one of your guys going there, but is it the Yesevich kid? I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Trey.
Yeah.
It's ECU, man. They might not run off 12 or 13 wins in a row, but they just never have a lull. It just seems like they're always winning 2 out of 3. They're winning 3 out of 4. And they're hanging right in the top 10.
ECU's kind of like Coastal in that. And again, we're going to have, because I love Duke. I still love Duke. I think Duke's really, really good. I think Clemson's really, really good. I know South Carolina. Yeah, I still think South Carolina are going to be in it. I think me and we talked about this. We like too many teams in the Carolinas. But I think one of the things about ECU is that, just like Coastal kind of takes their, MO or, who they are from their head coach. I just think I think East Carolina's the same way. East Carolina's the same way.
If they can host a regional, that's a really big home field advantage there. And I don't think a lot of people who aren't really plugged into college baseball, that place is wild.
And I don't mean to talk about this because one of my guys one of my high school guys are going there. But if they can figure out a way to get in that top 8 realm, and I think they will because of their strength of schedule this year with the conference and stuff. If they're in that top 8 realm, they are a nightmare for anyone that has to go there, because the atmosphere is going to be SEC level atmosphere, big time SEC level atmosphere. And there may not be, I think, there may not even be a team in the ACC that can rival the atmosphere of what East Carolina can do. Because North Carolina is okay, Clemson's okay, they're kind of quiet. But you're talking about a Arkansas, both the Mississippis, LSU type of atmosphere in Greenville, North Carolina. And if they can figure out a way to get in that top 8 realm, I would say right now on March 21st that you can pencil me in to put the Pirates in Omaha for the first time ever, and Cliff to get Cliff and the boys to get there for the first time ever.
It is a super fun place to play.
Yeah, it is.
It's really fun.
They set records every weekend.
Yeah.
Like every weekend I look and it's like, oh, record. Like
It is like the atmosphere is electric. And I mean,
10 years ago it was fun.
we played there in 2006. Like it was electric in 2006. And like there's way more people that go to the games now, and like it was packed. I had one of the worst chirps of my career at that place. My cleat got stuck on the turf halo behind home plate. And I tried to play it off, and someone was like, "I saw that." It just wore me out for the rest of the game. I was like, "Ah, God, that's terrible." It was a fun place to play.
They play "Welcome to the Jungle" when the team comes out on the field, and they get freaking rowdy at night. They got one of the best atmospheres. It's funny, there's a bunch of smaller-ish schools that people don't associate with huge atmospheres. Them, Southern Miss, Louisiana Lafayette, like those places are freaking wild.
Louisiana Lafayette's fun
They're
to play.
awesome places to play, and they don't get enough credit. And I would say that
I tell people this all the time, and I'm going to take a hit here because somebody's going to get mad from the Pacific part of the country. But the Sun Belt will run the Pac-12 out the door in terms of baseball. It's not even close. The Sun Belt is, you got ULL, you got
Coastal.
You had Southern Miss, you had a lot of other schools. Now a lot has changed, but you had these other schools. I mean, I was watching it last week. Coastal played Wake, and I'm going to get a Coastal kick here, but Coastal had 5,100 people that are on the lens there Tuesday.
No, from a pure attendance standpoint, it's not even close. Oregon State's the only team in the Pac-12 that draws.
But just that's what that means at that level for them in baseball. The Pac-12, like guys, like I know, you're trying, but it ain't that. It ain't it. It ain't it. The Sun Belt is better than you guys. I'm sorry. It's the SEC, it's the ACC, it's the Big 12, and it's the Sun Belt. That's it. The American here or there, because I don't even know who's in the American anymore because of all the the switches. But like that's it. Like those are that's it. Like that's the atmospheres. Those are the places that should be hosting, and and constantly hear, oh well, we're west of the Mississippi, so we don't get to host a regional. It's like, well, then do something. And I'll be honest, and I've said this to a lot of coaches that I know that coach in the West Coast. I give a ton of credit. Santa Barbara goes to Campbell.
Yep.
Opening weekend, ton of credit. St. Mary's goes to Gainesville to play Florida, wins a game, ton of credit. But I don't want to hear constantly, well, the Pac doesn't get, the West Coast Conference doesn't get the recognition that we deserve because of the RPI. Well, Santa Barbara did it. St. Mary's did it. Do it. If you're saying that the RPI is favoring the East Coast schools, then come east, come play, see what happens.
Or here's a thought. How about the teams in your conference get better and your RPI is boosted because everybody's good? Like the ACC.
But it's also why, and it's a brilliant move on their part, why they all play, like everyone makes the conference tournament. Because they all play super tough schedules, and then they all play another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games in the SEC tournament or ACC tournament, and all of a sudden their RPI is through the roof.
Yep.
Because at the back end of the year, you just played another 3, 4, 5, 6 teams that have unbelievable RPIs. Like, and that can be the separate. If you're a bubble team,
and up until last year, the Pac didn't have a conference tournament, and like everyone knew when the ACC switched and the SEC switched to the format that they're in, was to get more teams in because they knew the RPI would help them because it's a neutral site, right? Game, so a win counts more than a home win. So like everyone knew that they were doing that, and the Pac-12 and the WCC constantly push back. No, we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. Well, that's your own fault that you're not getting teams in. That's your own fault that you're not getting hosts because The SEC and the ACC, and I'll have to get to check on the Big 12. I don't know what the Big 12, but those teams were playing all these extra games that were all going up in the RPI because you didn't play a 280 opponent on a Tuesday, or you did play a 280 opponent on a Tuesday, and it helped because now you played a 54 ranked opponent, a bad SEC team, bad ACC team, 60 ranked team on a neutral site and won. It's a huge advantage in the RPI.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Big West. Like, here's the reality of it, because we were around long enough to know when these programs were really prominent. But the thing that hurts the Big West is that Cal State Fullerton and Long Beach aren't good anymore.
Yes.
Those two teams, like, there was a time not long ago where if Cal State Fullerton wasn't in a super regional, something was freaking wrong. Right? And like Irvine and Santa Barbara have been good and they've picked up some slack, but there was a time not long ago when all four of those teams were legitimate contenders to get to the College World Series, and it's just not that way. So the RPI has gone down that way. The other thing that hurts them is that the last 4 or 5 years, UCLA and USC haven't been very good. So even if you travel and you're in that Southern California region, you're not getting RPI wins. You're not getting a big boost midweek by going down to UCLA because they haven't been as good as they've been in the past. It's not the national championship UCLA Bruins, right? So, you know, you talked about Santa Barbara coming, like San Diego flies in and play Texas. Like, good for you, Brock. Like, if you want to boost your RPI, you're going to have to come east to do it because it's just the way it is.
I'm gonna do this real quick, and then we can finish however you guys want to finish. But I'm gonna read predominantly the best teams on the West Coast, their overall records this year on March 21st. Arizona State is 10-11. Arizona is 9-10. Stanford is 9-9. USC is 7-13. UCLA is 7-11. Tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah. Stanford's down this year.
I don't want to hear about the hosting. I don't want to hear about we're getting snubbed. There's never a year that if you look at the SEC rankings that they're like that. The SEC records. Never. There's never, even in the ACC. I mean, we're talking about an anomaly with Florida State last year, right? Like, I mean, those records are pathetic for some of the best programs in all of college baseball. Like, are you serious with that?
Yeah, they don't have a leg to stand on.
Arizona State under 500? Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, me and you, Andy, were on here a month and a half ago giving shade to teams losing one game in an SEC weekend, in an SEC non-conference weekend to a Northeast team, and you're going, all right, like, yeah, like they deserved it. You're talking about under 500 for some of these programs. Like, come on, guys. Like,
but there's a difference now though, because that's a standard you set for these SEC teams and the ACC teams. Is that if a team comes from down north and you don't sweep the series, it wasn't successful. Like, what's this? It's not 10 years ago is really what it comes down to. Like, you have to operate in the now.
Complain, right? If you complain that you don't have enough hosts out west, which they've consistently done, right? We're all on record that they've consistently done for the last decade. They don't have enough hosts, that the RPI skewed to the east of the Mississippi. Guys, take care of business, man.
There's one team will host out west. It'll be Oregon State.
Yeah.
That's it. Nobody else will host.
Well, Irvine or Santa Barbara could.
I don't know if they have the facilities to do it. Santa Barbara isn't even playing on their home field consistently right now.
Yeah, I know that, but teams that could potentially host could be Santa Barbara, or depending on how they finish out. Yeah,
I think one of those two could get in the mix because the other one will probably cancel the other out.
Yeah, and depending on the way that, yes, sure.
And Stanford's the odd one this year too, because of what they've done the last couple of years.
3 consecutive College World Series, like they were due to not be as good at some point, right?
Yeah, and they're not like them for. I'm not playing devil's advocate. I'm just adding a little bit more context. Like I 100% agree with you, but like that's also a place. It's the one place in the Pac-12 where like you can't dip into the portal and reload when you need to. Where I think when you're some of the historic powers on the West Coast, and you're not getting into the portal and you're not having the success that a lot of other schools are having throughout the country that are doing it. And I'm not saying you have to exclusively recruit out of it, but like it's not Harvard that you're going to. Like we can get some guys in here and we can play some baseball and have some success. Like, you know, I agree. I don't think that like it's been like that for years. And I mean, even in the last 10 years of College World Series, like there's only been 2 West Coast teams that have won the College World Series in the last decade. And it's UCLA in 13 and Ole Miss, Oregon State in 18. But, you know, I mean, Oregon State's been this way for, you know, yes, they had a couple down years like we talked about earlier, but like
they also won back-to-back national championships not too long ago.
They're just
right.
like,
And there used to be a time when the West Coast dominated. Like,
oh yeah, that was the 80s and 90s.
2004, Cal State Fullerton. 2006, Oregon State. 2007, Oregon State. 2008, Fresno State.
4 seed.
Arizona wins it in 2012. UCLA wins it in 2013. And it's
but I think the flip side to that though is like there's only, I want to say only, but like they're not beating other West Coast teams for the most part in the World Series. You know what I mean? Like they're beating UNC, they're beating Georgia, they're beating Texas, they're beating Florida, they're beating South Carolina. Like eventually it was going to flip, and it has, and like it's not going to swing back anytime soon until they get better at stuff. And you know, I think there's been some questionable stuff that has gone on from, you know, hiring standpoint at some places. Like, you know, I think it's extremely hard in college baseball to hire. We're not going to go down this rabbit hole tonight, but like I think it's extremely hard to hire guys who have never coached solely based off of the fact that they've played professional baseball. It's a wildly different game. You have to recruit. There's a lot more that goes in there. Like,
yep,
you're hard pressed to find a lot of guys who played professional baseball, didn't coach, and then were hired as a coach who have had a lot of success in college coaching. And I think it's a fallacy, you know, and I think that like that happens at some of these big time programs because it's like, oh, it's an alum and he played in the big leagues and he can win. And you find out that it's not the best, and you end up setting your program back further rather than, you know, maybe hiring somebody who's a little bit better fit to take that program over for a while and recruit and has a lot of recruiting connections. And, you know, you're not going to win nationally at a lot of these programs if you can't legitimately go and recruit nationally. It's just not going to happen. Like, sure, you're going to have certain pockets you can go to, but, you know, you got to be able to go do it nationally and win.
Yeah, well, I think you're spot on about the coaching piece. I think that's worth a conversation at some point. The other thing that you bring up, though, this is the recruiting part, and I think what's happening, and I think it's pretty easy to see, is that the best kids in California aren't staying in California anymore.
Yeah,
because here's the reality of it. Like, it used to be 8 or 10 years ago that if you were the best kid in Southern California, you were going to UCLA, right? But now, one, you got West Coast guys scattered up and down the SEC. Like, Jay Johnson's a West Coast guy. Like, he's going into California, and if you're a top dude in the country, like, you're getting money and you're coming to play at LSU. You're not staying at UCLA anymore. Because why would you if you're a kid? If Matt Hobbs calls you to go pitch at Arkansas, Matt's a West Coast guy, and he comes and brings you to Arkansas's facility and they get 11,000 people a game, or you can go play the crickets at UCLA in a below average facility. Like, why are you staying at UCLA anymore? Like, those top kids aren't staying there. And I think it's gutted some of the perennial teams in California. That's just my thought. Like, the local kids who used to go to Cal State Fullerton and used to go to Long Beach, the Evan Longorias, the Troy Tulowitzkis, like those dudes aren't staying in Southern California anymore. They're leaving. And I think it's hurt. I think it's hurt a lot of those schools.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's also a lot. We're going to go down this rabbit hole, and I don't want to tonight. But the recruiting has shrunken. It has, like, recruiting has shrunk. Like, you know, the top guys used to stay in California, and like the mid tier guys would obviously stay there too. Like, you know, sure, you're going to have some guys leave, but you know, one of our really good friends who played at Duke used to say I had to leave my home state to play college baseball. Like, there weren't a lot of guys, like the top guys didn't leave Texas, you know, and I think that it's a little bit of a different animal now. Like, you can go get, you know, go look at rosters, man. Like, you can go get guys out of New York and New Hampshire and Massachusetts to go down south and play baseball. And you can get guys, like, it's a lot easier, I think, to get guys to come in. And I think that, like, the other side of that is it's a lot, like you heard when the Pac-12, like, oh, my parents aren't going to watch. Like, man, it's on TV. Every game now you can find on ESPN Plus or on the internet. Like, it's not really, like, it shrinks it that way too. Like, people, I don't think people are afraid to be like, hey man, I'm gonna go to the other side of the country and see where I'm at, because and then throw in the fact that we're down to 20 rounds in the draft. Like, if you want to get drafted, you got to go somewhere you're going to develop, and you want to test yourself against guys that are good. And why not go do it at a place where you can play in the SEC in front of thousands of fans every weekend? And like, Aaron playing.
I think part of it too is that the best high school kid in California and the top kids are going to the SEC, and they're doing what? If they're not good enough, if they go, hey, I'm not quite good enough, then where do I go? Go to Long Beach, go to Fullerton.
Yeah.
But why settle for those places, like you're saying, Andy, in a very, very low end facility, probably no NIL money, you know, whatever, minimum scholarship, 50%, but like, who really cares at that point? Like, why go and settle for that nonsense when I can go play in the SEC, maybe make $100,000 or $50,000 for a year just because I'm a high end recruit? If it doesn't work, what does it matter anyway? I'll be at Long Beach as a sophomore. Who gives a crap? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it's like, there's no risk involved in terms of going for it all. And if it works out, then I make $500,000 in NIL money. I'm going to be a first round pick, or I'm going to be a second round pick. And I'm the king of, you know, LSU or whatever. I'm dating, you know, whatever. What have you done? And it doesn't work. I'll go to Long Beach with 12 of my high school friends, and I'll be a Division I player, and maybe I'll get drafted there. But if not, no big deal. I'll have a great time, and I'll get a Long Beach degree, and it is what it is. But there's no risk involved anymore, because it's just go for the best, which I totally get, because there's only a small window that you're going to have that opportunity. And in my opinion, you should make as much money as you possibly can whenever you can make it. So if somebody's willing to give you $150,000 to go to LSU or Mississippi State or whoever else, do it. Because Long Beach and Fullerton ain't offering that. Cal ain't offering that. Cal, the doors are barely open.
Yeah, I mean, if you're that good and the SEC calls, there's no reason to stay on the West Coast. Now, the only school that can come in there and get that kid, if you're really fighting over them, is Oregon State, because they live and breathe baseball up there. The facility's legit. They can act independently.
No, the other thing I'll say too is I do know that, not to interrupt you, and I'm sorry for that, but Oregon, in terms of NIL money, can compete with the SEC, and that's why they've been able to code down into SoCal to get some of their top end guys because of the Nike money.
Mm-hmm.
And their facility is absurd. I mean, you know, we talked about it last year with Oral Roberts being up there in the super electric atmosphere. They had
Great
atmosphere. 7,000 or 8,000 a night. Like, it was awesome up there. Like, it was super, super, super cool. And we were all on the Oral Roberts train, but besides the fact,
maybe they're the maybe they're the outlier. I never come back to them because Oregon State's history is so rich that like you can always hang your hat on like, hey man, we've won 3 national championships in the last 20 years. Like I don't know if there's any other school who can say that.
Well, Oregon's new as a program too. You got to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
When they started baseball
when did
15 years ago.
When did they restart it?
Kent State, wasn't that like their second year or something like that when Stony Brook went to the World Series? So 2012, maybe 13.
That might be it.
They brought George Horton up there to run it. I think it was 13 from Fullerton.
From Fullerton, yep. I forget but it's recent. Like, I mean, they were like, yeah, they're not going to have the history because they're recent. But I mean,
Washington's done a nice job. I mean, I know, with Jason Kelly up there, like, they were in Omaha, like, I think they'll do a good job, like, but I just think some of the lore of some of those Pac-12, the old, I guess we'll call it the old right now, the old Pac-12 schools are just, it's hard. They're fighting a battle that they haven't had to fight in a long time in terms of kids leaving the West Coast. The SoCal kid is considering Mississippi State and Oregon. That wasn't the case 10 years ago, 15 years ago when, kind of when we were younger. Like, just part of it now. And part of it's just the way that the college game has gone. There's NIL money, there's the portal, there's just a lot different, but the conference realignment is changing a lot of things because I think, like you see, like the lore of like, oh, I'm going to play at home. My parents can see me. Well, if you play in a big conference now, like your parents probably can't, outside of your home games, unless you're, close to home, your parents can't see you because you're playing teams from all over the damn place. Like, you're playing in the Big 12, you're playing, UCF and BYU. Like it's around the country. Like, you know what I mean?
Yep. Oregon, for context, Oregon brought it back in 2009.
Yeah. I just still have a tough time thinking of them as that destination, but you're right. They are the other one from a money perspective, from a facility perspective that can keep kids on the West Coast.
Done a great job, like just from other knowledge, they've done a great job, like in California. These last 2 classes, like they've done. I think they're going to be all right. Like I don't think this is the last that we hear of Oregon and a super went away from Omaha.
I agree. Anything else you guys got?
Go watch some games.
Yeah.
SEC, ACC, everyone's in full tilt this weekend for the most part. Jump in, watch as much college baseball as you can.
Let's get a quick update here. Still 1-0 in the Arkansas-Auburn game. Top 9.
Runs, I'm shocked.
Top 9.
Anybody either. Just throwing that out there.
We got 2-1 Mississippi State up on Texas A&M in the bottom of the 5th. And quick update on the Wake Forest Louisville game. Hold, loading. Got the spinny wheel of death on my phone right now. We got 8-7, bottom of the 7th. Hartle was able to get through 6. This is a big one for Wake because if they can win today, got a good chance of winning that series with Burns going tomorrow, and they need a boost. So
I said it to you guys this week. Burns on game 2 or Saturday with a win is good luck.
Yeah. Outside of Hagen Smith, it's tough to argue that
there's anybody more dominant in a game. And I think you could probably argue Hagen Smith would be the most dominant in game 1 in terms of record-wise. And I think Chase Burns, where he pitches, is game 2. I think there's nobody better in the country on Saturday or game 2, whatever you want to call it, than Burns.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, all right, dudes. Jonathan, you're the man. We'll do this again soon. Hopefully, we got a little bit more right this time. I'm sure we got some stuff wrong, which is why we do this, because it's fun to talk about it. But maybe the walks will go down by the time we talk again next. But we'll see what happens there. But thanks for listening, everybody. Jonathan, thanks for joining us, man. We'll talk to you again soon. Come back next week for another good talk with us here at EMD. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.